If you would like to listen to or download any or all of Power at Work's blogcasts in podcast form, they are available for streaming and download on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast. Just search Power at Work on any podcast platform and enjoy all of Power at Work's podcasts. While you're there, two things we would like you to do. First, subscribe, and that way you won't miss any Power at Work podcasts. Second, please give Power at Work a 5-star rating, a like, a love, whatever is the tool that your podcast provider gives you. It helps others who care about workers and worker power to find Power at Work's content. They will be grateful, and so will we. Hello, powerful people. Welcome to the Power Half Hour live on LinkedIn and published for posterity on poweratwork.us. I'm Seth Harris from the Burns Center for Social Change. The Power Half Hour brings you more voices, more news, more worker power insights, and we do all that in just 30 minutes. I've got an expert panel of 3 guests who I'll introduce to you in just a minute. Our video audience and live audience can see them arrayed in front of you. They look really good, don't they? Considering what's going on right now in the world, they look pretty good, I think. We'll see how they sound. It could be very gravelly voices today. We're going to have to see. The panelists are going to talk about the big stories and big developments that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. They'll also talk about what's coming down the road. What are the big events, big activities, big developments, big news stories that we'll see in the near-term future. And then at the very end, we will offer our guests an embarrassingly inadequate token of our gratitude for their willingness to talk with you with shameless plugs and shout-outs. They can promote whatever or whoever they would like, and self-promotion is enthusiastically encouraged. And then, if we leave you hungry for more, we will jump into overtime. That is your opportunity, audience, to ask questions, make comments. Just go to LinkedIn Live, where this is being published, and you can type your comments out. Our producer, Ayush, will find them. He'll put them in the chat, and I will read them off to our guests. That's going to happen in about 28 minutes when we start overtime. One last thing before I introduce you to the people who are going to make you smarter today. Stay up to date with Power Half Hour by following the Power at Work page on LinkedIn or subscribing to Power at Work. Just go to poweratwork.us, fill in the subscription form, and we'll keep you updated on everything that we're doing. All right, enough delay, enough prefatory comments. Let's meet our panel. From the cradle of American democracy and the home of the All-American Cheesesteak, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, she's a labor reporter for In These Times magazine and a world-renowned author of adult and children's books. It's our friend Kim Kelly. Hey, Kim.
Hi.
From the city where the West begins, Fort Worth, Texas. He's a professor of law and the director of the workplace law program at Texas A&M, and one of my buddies from back when I was a full-time law professor. It's Michael Z. Green. Welcome to the Power Half Hour, Michael.
Thank you, Seth. Glad to be here.
And from our, I don't think I can say freezing cold now because it looks like it's over freezing and it's beginning to melt here in the nation's capital, Dave. He's the labor reporter for the Huffington Post. It's Dave Jamieson. Hi, Dave.
Hey, great to be here, Seth. Yeah, we're above 35, so we're starting to thaw out here today.
Yeah, there's no way this turns into massive flooding throughout the district. No chance that happens, given what a great job they did cleaning up after the snowstorm, he said, as sarcastically as he possibly could through a podcast. Okay, panel, topic number 1. Kim, just a warning, I'm going to start with you on this one. We're going to look over our shoulders. We're going to look in the rearview mirror. I want you to tell us what's the most important or most interesting development or the biggest news story affecting workers, worker power, and unions that's happened over the last couple of weeks. Kim, take us away.
So one of the big ones, I'm sure everyone here has heard about it because we're all labor nerds, but the UAW has scored a big victory in the South, in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm like looking on my phone to make sure I have all of the stats right. 3,200 workers at the Volkswagen manufacturing facility there have won a tentative contract. This is a huge deal. It might sound, for people that aren't as plugged in, it might be okay, like cool, another union contract. This is a big deal. This is the first Southern auto worker outside of the big three, foreign-owned automaker, where workers have accomplished this, that have gotten to a TA, they've unionized, they are making history down there. It's incredibly difficult to organize and to unionize and to successfully bargain a union contract, a strong union contract in many southern states where right to work is still king. And these workers have really pulled off something incredible. So I am very excited about that. It's like we haven't heard about the UAW in a little bit. They've been quietly up to some things behind the scenes, and then bam, they're winning in the South. We love to see it.
Now, do you think I'm gonna press you on this a little bit? The UAW had hoped that their organizing victory in Chattanooga at the VW plant would help them to build organizing successes with other foreign manufacturers in the South. So far, that has not happened. They do represent some truck, I think Daimler truck plants in North Carolina. Do you think that now that there's a contract and they can go around to other auto workers and say, hey, everybody, here's what we were able to get for these VW workers, do you think that this is going to juice the UAW's organizing in the South?
Absolutely. Because honestly, getting results is how you show people that this is something worth doing. Sure, like I think they unionized successfully. Maybe it was back in it's been a few years they've been working on this. And
15,
unionizing,
I think it's at least 15 years. I started hearing about it in the early 2010s. Yeah.
Okay. It's been a little while. They've been working on it. But getting to the point where you're like, we have a TA, we have successfully gotten the company to sit down and bargain with us and acquiesce to a lot of our demands. That is a big deal. Like showing that we can do this, you can do this. It's great advertising. So now they have this victory. They can go to any other plant, any other target, and be like, hey, look what we have done, successfully accomplished. Wouldn't you like to do this too? I think having that contract, it's a TA right now, but assuming that the workers vote for it, having that contract in hand and being able to say, we got these raises, we got these wins, we got these protections, there is no better advertising for joining a union than results.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with that more. It'll be very interesting to watch what happens at other foreign-owned plants in the South. All right, Michael, looking backwards, what's the biggest story, the biggest event, the biggest development, or the most interesting development over the last couple of weeks that affects workers and worker power?
All right. So, Seth, for fear of being rejected from this podcast and removed permanently, this is like asking you, like, what is your favorite kid in terms of all of the things that are coming out of the water hose that the president unleashes in terms of workplace issues? So I'm going to say one story. I kind of have a couple, but I'll say them briefly within your time frame, so hopefully that'll help. Number one, the NLRB is back, or is it back? They have new appointments. They have Republican appointments now, and so they now have a quorum and they can go forward. But if you think about the Great Fifth Circuit where I am, where there was a decision saying that the NLRB is unconstitutional, and that also not only applies to the board members, but to administrative law judges, what does that mean for us in the Fifth Circuit in terms of if we want to file an unfair labor practice or anything else? So that's one. The second one, the great EEOC chair, Andrea Lucas, issued a video reaching out to white men saying that they need to apply for the EEOC for lawsuits. What does that mean for DEI and diversity? And then because I write about arbitration, something under the radar is a decision involving Brian Flores, the NFL coach, and arbitration, and how the NFL is trying to get the Supreme Court to hear that case. And a couple of public interest foundations have also joined in, who say they care about individual rights, but I'm not sure why they want the commissioner to be the arbitrator. Those are my concerns or news stories. My one answer.
What is the issue in the Flores case?
So the Flores case in the Second Circuit, what they ended up deciding is that the fact that you want the CEO of one of the defendants to be the arbitrator, they applied this effective vindication of your rights, and they actually used the term, which is in the title of an article I have coming out. That's in my third question, answer to your question. But what they said is that it was really arbitration in name only, and they rejected it. And so they're trying to argue that the Supreme Court should take this up under the Federal Arbitration Act and not allow that minor exception to the FAA to apply.
Very, very interesting. But let me also say, I don't want to miss the opportunity to say, thank God, a senior government official is finally standing up for white men. I know Dave feels strongly about this as well. I mean, it's what a relief. I think I speak for all of us when I say, finally, the oppression there's an end point to the oppression that white men in America are experiencing. Dave, you don't have to comment on that if you don't want to. What's your big story the last couple of weeks?
Finally, my time, I guess, Seth. I'd say the most interesting thing we've seen, I feel, in the last couple of months is the general strike we saw in Minnesota as a protest against the Trump administration's deportation campaign. Whenever people start talking general strike, I'm always very skeptical. We often see it online, in social media, people yelling general strike, general strike. It's very hard and complicated to pull something like that off. It requires a tremendous amount of buy-in, both grassroots and institutional, to make something happen. And I think, they largely kind of pulled it off here, right? I mean, they had hundreds of businesses shut down for the day. And they had this remarkable turnout in the streets, as a protest to the Trump administration. I think it was very interesting how it came together. I mean, this was largely, obviously, the entire community there in the Minneapolis area. They've been under siege, by this federal crackdown, and kind of remarkable community engagement around the whole thing, and the ice watching and people trying to help one another. But you also, I think there was a lot of eagerness for this something on a large scale to happen. But you also had institutional buy-in. You had the local labor federation, Minneapolis Area Labor Fed, endorse this and get on board. And you had local unions there that said, we're going to do what we can to make this happen. It's not an easy thing to do, right? I mean, it's sort of an irony here that union workers are, in a lot of ways, can't do the general strike, right? They're under collective bargaining agreements that generally have no strike clauses. And so they were talking to their members saying, hey, look, try to find a way to not work that day, while honoring your contract. Find a way to get out there in the street, find a way to support other people, union or non-union, who want to do this. And so I think, it was pretty startling to see how many people were out and the degree to which they were able to kind of really shut things down economically for a day. I think what's going to be interesting is how much we see that exported to other cities as the administration takes its crackdown to new places.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fascinating. I happened to be in a European city in December when there was a general strike called by the Left Labor Federation in that country. And let me just say, it looked a whole lot like what happened in Minneapolis. You didn't have 100% shutdown of commerce. Not every worker struck. They can't, or they didn't. But you still had a dramatic slowing of commerce. You had lots and lots and lots of people staying home. You had lots and lots of people out in the streets. There were union folks walking around making sure that things were not working, and they were calling it in when they were. You would really be hard pressed to find a big difference between what happens in a European social democracy, where unions are big and powerful, and in the United States, in Minneapolis, where unions have a much lower union density rate and much, much less power. So I think you're right. I think Minneapolis established a model. You're not going to get 100% participation. You can't. But you can absolutely make a powerful, powerful, powerful message come out, and it goes across the country. It was covered very, very widely, and that's basically the best thing that you can hope for. And it contributed, I think, to some of the changes that we saw in Minneapolis, although that's a whole other podcast. Okay, with everybody's permission, I'm actually going to jump in with a story. I almost never do this, but it's something that we've covered on Power at Work, and I want to make sure to mention it. And it also has broad implications for the academic community, and I'm an academic, so all politics is local. Full-time, non-tenure track faculty are the fastest growing category of faculty in higher education in the United States. They're about a fifth of the professoriate in the United States. And these are people who work full-time. They have full-time teaching loads, research loads, community service loads. They earn less, and often they have to apply for their jobs every few years, and there's no guarantee that they're going to be renewed. They don't have tenure, so they're not necessarily going to be renewed. So at one of my alma maters, New York University, the contract faculty won a voluntary representation election in February of 2024. It became the largest union of full-time, non-tenure track faculty at any private university in the United States. We have some bigger unions in the public sector, but not in the private sector. It's been 2 years since they have been bargaining their first contract with the university. They are still very far apart on fair compensation, job security, academic freedom, support for research and professional development, the continued right to be a principal investigator, for example, when there's research, fair workload policies, improved benefits. I mean, it's the whole panoply of the issues. And the university, as is, let me just say, common with university administrations, absolutely digging in its heels. So the union has been forced to call a strike authorization vote. I'm mentioning it today because voting started yesterday, and voting will continue until February 20th. If the members vote yes, the bargaining committee will have the authorization to call a strike at NYU. Doesn't mean they will call a strike, but it is possible that they will do it. And then let me just say, you want to see how prominent these workers are in the university? Let them go out on strike and see how many classes end up getting canceled, see how many students end up staying home and missing classes. This is a huge issue throughout all of academia. There's a lot of organizing going on. A lot of unions are involved in it. The UAW is involved in it. The AAUP and AFT are involved in it. Lots of unions are involved in it. This is the biggest. And so I think it's going to have repercussions throughout private sector higher education. So it's well worth watching. Okay. I usually don't do that, but I really felt strongly that we should get that one out. Let's go on to topic number 2. Guests, we're going to get out our crystal balls and we're going to look into the future. We're not looking at 2056. We're looking at sort of the near term, intermediate term future, next few months, next few years, maybe a decade, not more than that. The question for you, and I'm going to start with you on this one, Michael, what will be the most important story or development or innovation or event that's going to affect workers, worker power, and unions in that near-term future? Michael, take us away.
All right. So again, having to pick amongst several of my kids and trying to pick one story, definitely a challenge. I mean, because I think there's so much, again, out there that you could point to. I mean, you could talk about AI or the continued blatant attacks on the federal sector workers, the expansion of these DEI attacks, even though those are just losers to me. But healthcare and what's going on. But I think the most, and also ICE, but I think the most important story coming up within the next year or two will be exactly what happens during the midterm elections, and what that will mean for workers' rights and issues in our country, and in particular, how the voting process is either protected or not protected during those midterm elections. We've heard the president say some things about the elections and the voting process. And I think that what happens during the midterm elections will be kind of hopefully a landmark event in terms of stopping the water hose that is going on all the attacks on all the workers' rights that are in place right now, and continuing and expanding, because that'll be an opportunity to at least have some level of check on some of the things that might be going on.
Absolutely fascinating. I agree with you on that. The President of the United States has said that he wants to nationalize elections. And by that, he doesn't mean the messaging should be a national message. He wants the White House to take control of elections in the states.
Yeah.
the fact that the Constitution actually not only doesn't allow that, but specifically gives the authority to states and state legislatures in particular, I don't think is a barrier for him. I don't
Yeah.
think that gets in his way in the
Yeah.
least. So it'll be interesting to see what develops there. That's a good one. Michael, David, what do you got for us coming in the future?
So I think, one thing I'm really trying to keep an eye on in the coming months and, frankly, the next couple of years is how unions try to weather the Trump era. I think this is not a good climate right now for unions to be operating in. I mean, we're already seeing union elections go down. There's a softening labor market, which doesn't help. And then you have this whole regulatory framework that's being turned against unions, and that we're going to have a functioning NLRB. It's almost certainly not going to be friendly to unions. We had, basically a year of an inoperable board. It's not a great time. It's not a favorable time to be organizing, right? And it's a very, really kind of 180 in terms of the environment from 3 or 4 years ago, right? And so we've seen Starbucks workers on strike recently. They still don't have a contract. The Amazon JFK8 workers are unionized. They don't have a contract. In fact, they're still not being recognized by Amazon. A lot of those splashy campaigns from a few years ago are struggling, right? And this is not; these are not favorable terms to be trying to move forward under. And so, I think a lot of unions kind of are trying to sort of keep their heads down in the back, stay out of the administration's crosshairs, and I get that. I do hear from some people who I think feel a little frustrated, feel like maybe the labor movement isn't stepping up to the degree it needs to right now to kind of fight all of the attacks that have been going on. And so, are we looking at just a couple more years of just marginal decline in density? Is that just try to kind of eke through this here, or is there some really big time resistance that's going to sprout up, sort of like we've seen on the immigration front in recent months? And so it's like I said, not a very very favorable moment for unions, and really interested to see how they try to weather it in the next couple of years.
Okay, so I want to make, I have a comment and I have a question. Mm-hmm. I'm talking to a bunch of folks in the organizing world, and they are still organizing. It's not that the labor movement sort of like a turtle pulled its head and arms in and they're in a shell and just hoping that everything is going to pass. They are still out there aggressively organizing. And from what they tell me, they're getting many, many, many more worker inquiries than they could possibly service with organizing campaigns and the organizing staffs that they have right now. There just is a limit to what they can do. They're having to say no to workers who would like to organize, and some of those workers go out and do it on their own. So my sense is that I'm not disagreeing with anything that you just said, but my sense is that the organizing is still happening. Now, whether or not it turns into a board election or something else, that's another story. But I think the organizing is still going on. So, okay, so you posited two possibilities. One is greater activism, greater militancy, and the turtle. Let's just call it the turtle. Do you have a prediction for us, an assessment of where you think this is going to go?
I mean, I tend to be a pessimist, so I guess I'd lean towards turtle. But these are like crazy times, right? Things are very volatile right now, and I think people. And I'm not just talking about people in labor and sort of like activist types, but we're seeing like regular people getting politically engaged in ways that they never imagined they would be. I mean, sort of what's happened in Minneapolis and other cities is like kind of remarkable. And I saw it maybe not on the Minneapolis degree, but here in DC when we had our own federal basically occupation, the president declared a crime emergency and there were, federal agents all over the place and people were having, run-ins with FBI agents and DHS investigate, just regular people. It was pretty wild times and to see people sort of engage and people try to kind of meet the moment was really something. And so, and I also think a lot of people on the left have been inspired by what's happened in Minneapolis, right? Horrific things happen there, but also pretty remarkable things in terms of, again, that engagement and people trying to sort of figure out a way to push back. And so this could go in a lot of different directions. And I think like sort of predicting or projecting anything is so difficult and foolish right now because of every month things change right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfectly fair. Okay, Kim, what's coming down the pike that our audience needs to know about?
Right, so we got these kind of macro views from Dave and Professor Green, and I want to pull into a little bit more of a micro view, like a little niche that I kind of obsess over. I'm going to talk about silica again, but so I've been following. I'm really interested in workplace safety and the ways that this current DOL is failing to enforce or really let any safety regulations through. Like we're seeing the slow heat death of the heat standard, of the silica exposure rule that was supposed to help stem the tide of the black lung epidemic in Appalachia. But right now, we're seeing this specific bill that's making me so mad. It's called HR 5437, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Stone Slab Products Act. And that sounds pretty innocuous. But what that is trying to do, which is really just a symptom of the greater anti-worker, anti-labor climate we're in, that is trying to make it more difficult for like countertop cutting workers, like the folks that make your quartz countertops, to make it more difficult for them, actually illegal for them to sue the manufacturers of these products because they're all getting silicosis. These products they're ubiquitous, like everyone either dreams of or has a marble countertop. People make those, and the industry is centered in California. 98% of the workers engaged in this work are Latino, and silicosis rates among that workforce are skyrocketing to the point where it has, let me see, I have some data. It's 10 times as much as it was a few years ago. Essentially, 2018 in California, 4 diagnosed cases of silicosis. 2025, 43. And sure, in a macro sense, okay, that's a few people having a hard time. But that is a terrifying trend. And the Republicans in Congress are trying to make it easier for this to continue. This is a substance that, there are safer alternatives. This is banned in Australia because it's so hurtful to workers. And this is one example, but I think it is part of this broader anti-safety, anti-regulatory environment that is hurting workers in so many industries. This is something I'm going to try and chase down myself, but if this is happening in one pocket of the country, imagine what's happening everywhere else. So it's making me sick.
Well, it's making a lot of workers sick as well. Thanks for tracking that down. And the way the Labor Department is deregulating workplace safety and health is really pretty disgusting. And a lot of workers are going to get sick and die and get injured as a consequence of it.
The Nazi memes aren't helping either.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, they keep plagiarizing the Hitler Youth. I'm not exactly sure what's good about that, but they keep doing it. Okay, I'll just jump in with one very, very quickly. SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Union, is going to begin negotiations with the Hollywood studios this month. Everyone remembers their 2023 strike where, frankly, the unions kicked the you-know-what out of the studios because the studios were trying to bust, particularly the writers' union. The parties are starting earlier this year. Neither side really wants to have a strike. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be really instructive for the rest of the labor movement to see how these unions that are most at risk with respect to artificial intelligence deal with that issue in their collective bargaining. They dealt with it in 2023, but I think there's going to be next generation negotiating over that issue. There are a lot of other issues. It's not the only issue, but that will be a very, very big issue. Okay. We've gotten to everybody's favorite part of the show. It's shameless plugs and shout outs. People wait for this. They wait for the whole show to see this. Each guest will get about a minute, a little less, to plug or shout out anything or anyone they would like. Dave Jamieson, what is your shameless plug or shout out, sir?
So my shameless plug, I'm gonna encourage people to read the coverage from my HuffPost colleagues on everything that's been going on in the immigration crackdown. We've had reporters cycle through Minneapolis doing great on the ground reporting. Hugely important story. So go to HuffPost and check it out. I'm also I'm gonna plug Kim, even though she's hopefully gonna plug herself. And every other freelancer out there grinding it out. I mean, it's not an easy world in journalism right now. A lot of jobs lost, as many of you have seen. And freelancing is tough. And people like Kim who are out there just finding a way to do the stories they want to do. I got huge respect for it, and her coverage on the silica issue has been tremendous, and black lung. So read Kim's stuff.
Absolutely. So let me just say, especially pressing, given that we're in the early stages of the funeral for one of the great journalistic institutions in our country, the Washington Post. Dave, I know you know this, and the others have been watching it very, very closely. It is dismal over there. All right, Kim Kelly, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
Oh, man. I mean, there are only a handful of labor reporters left in this country that actually have jobs. One of them is Dave Jamieson. Some might say he's one of the best. Read his coverage, too. We're all pals here. And speaking in the Washington Post, thankfully, a big chunk of the folks that were so savagely laid off are covered by their union, but the foreign correspondents aren't. And a lot of them are stuck. So there have been some fundraising GoFundMes put together to try and help get these folks home after one of the richest men in the world told them to go F themselves. And otherwise, something besides, I am a freelancer. I write for In These Times and The Baffler, and Teen Vogue is still letting me in there somehow for now. But a cool little project I got to be a part of very recently just came out is this podcast in collaboration with EWOC, the Emergency Workers Organizing Committee, supported by UE, the Electoral Workers Union. They have a new podcast called Unite and Win and I'm the narrator interviewer type, but I talk to real organizers about about the work they've done, about the strikes they've won or are trying to win, about the contract bargaining, about dealing with issues in the shop floor. It's a really straightforward and accessible and hopefully fun to listen to kind of audio handbook based on their actual handbook called Unite and Win that you can buy from their web store. So there's a podcast. If you like my terrible accent, bless your heart, you can go listen to more of it from Unite and Win.
We love your accent. Michael Z. Green, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
Well, first of all, I'd like to get a shout out to Seth about having this podcast and allowing academics in the labor area to have a little bit of a voice, because I feel like, I used to get contacted a lot by wonderful journalists like the two of you who are on here and get my opinion, but it seems like nobody contacts me anymore. And so I'm trying to plug myself to be a voice for some things to you guys. Maybe you can call me, reach out. I'd love to comment. And so having this podcast is great. The last thing I would want to say is that I've been writing this article for about a year, wasn't getting any traction. It's getting ready to be published in the American University Law Review. It's called Black Labor Matters. And what I'm looking at is the attack on Black workers and organized workers and what they can do in a time frame where there's no law, no agencies to support them. And I'll be also speaking on it in St. Louis University's Law Review Symposium on March 6th, where I'm the keynote speaker talking about how to protect workers in an environment where the law doesn't work for them.
Excellent. That's a really good self-promotion. I really like that a lot. Audience, stick around if you can. We've got the Power Half Hour's overtime in just a minute for Kim Kelly, Michael Z. Green, and Dave Jamieson, and our producer, Ayush Kanvalkar. Thank you for joining the Power Half Hour. Stick around for overtime, but for right now, class is dismissed. All right, panel, take a breath, take a drink, just breathe a little bit, and we're going to get started with overtime. Hey, live audience, if you would like to ask a question and you're on LinkedIn right now, you can post a comment where you're watching this, and Ayush will go over to LinkedIn and he'll read your comment. He'll feed it to me in the studio. He's already fed me the questions that we got from our emails. let me just see what we have. Let me, there's one question that I know that I want to get to. I don't see it here. I used the question about, if you could post up the question about Kaiser Permanente, that would be great. We do have a post. We have a question from our friend Andrew Cook, who's the National Press Secretary at the American Federation of Teachers. Very proud to have them as a friend and sponsor. Andrew said, I heard that Virginia has excluded higher ed from its public sector collective bargaining bill, but not sure if that has been reported yet. Dave, are you hearing anything about Virginia and the public sector collective bargaining? Because this is, let me just say, this is one of the potentially big advances for organized labor, one of the new platforms for them to organize tens of thousands of workers. But it looks like higher ed might be excluded. Have you heard anything about that? Because this is the first time hearing about it.
I do not. I have not been following it. I mean, I followed it when Virginia passed its original law extending collective bargaining to public sector workers. I have not tracked any potential carve-outs like that, but I will look into it. So thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, that's a good one. Kim, have you heard anything about Virginia and public sector collective bargaining?
Honestly, I've been trying to work on a book right now, so I haven't been following things as closely as I should.
I hear you. Okay, here's the question I was expecting, and this is one I'm going to jump in on if you don't mind, guests. Does anybody know what's happening in the Kaiser Permanente strike or the Starbucks strike? They're both huge strikes, but we're not hearing a lot about them in the mainstream media. I want to comment on the Kaiser Permanente strike because I've been in touch with some of the folks out there about what's going on. So just to refresh everybody, and let me just say, I'm eager to have one of you jump in on the Starbucks strike because I have not been. I know that it's still going on, but I don't really know where things stand. So what's going on with Kaiser Permanente is the United Nurses Associations of California and the United Healthcare Professionals, so UNAC, UHCP, which represents tens of thousands of these frontline healthcare workers with every imaginable healthcare title that you can possibly imagine. They are on strike in California and Hawaii against Kaiser Permanente with their siblings from the Alliance of Healthcare Unions. The unions have been bargaining nationally and locally with Kaiser Permanente. A lot of their positions, and this is very common in healthcare, a lot of their positions are about better care for patients. But Kaiser's just not agreeing to the contract. In fact, they are backpedaling on some of the issues. So what are some of the issues? Making sure that appointments are scheduled in a sensible, patient-focused way. Kaiser dismissed joint decision-making about scheduling. They said it's a non-starter. They want to have unilateral control over not just nurses, but also when they can bring in traveling nurses, which is a very big issue for the unions. So corporate control is what they want when it comes to scheduling. There's a fair pay issue in this strike. The members of UNAC UHCP are 8% behind inflation after their last contract and 7% behind the other unions in their last contract. So they have asked for a meaningful pay increase, and they really want to have a voice in decisions that affect patient care and patient safety, including things like staffing. Now, here's the thing. So people think about healthcare and Kaiser Permanente, which I think purports to be a not-for-profit. Their reserves, they have cash reserves. Their cash reserves have increased by 50% from 2021 to 2024. They now have $66 billion in reserves. They can afford to do everything the unions are asking them to do. They're just deciding not to do it, and they're moving backwards. They're proposing things like cuts in pay and pensions and retirement benefits and healthcare benefits for workers. They're moving back on protections for workers in the event of a sale. In the event Kaiser or part of Kaiser gets sold, they're not providing protection for that. They want to move off of those. These are proposals they made earlier in the bargaining, and now they're moving off of them, which my understanding, Michael, is that's not consistent with the law. And they don't want to provide guardrails for salaried professionals working past their scheduled hours, right? This is one of the problems with being a salaried professional, particularly in healthcare, is they can exploit the hell out of you and have you work unlimited hours, and they don't have to pay you overtime because you get a salary. So I'm really troubled that in this institution that for a long time had been thought of as a worker-friendly institution, Kaiser Permanente, that they're having this battle with their unions over things like patient care. And there's a reason why we are seeing strikes throughout healthcare right now. Strike in New York among nurses. There have been strikes. Kaiser Permanente had a strike last year. There are big issues, structural issues in healthcare, and the big healthcare companies are not facing up to them. They're not addressing staffing issues, pay issues, recruitment issues, patient care issues. They need to. This should be a model employer, and it really is not. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes out. All right, anybody want to jump in on the Starbucks strike and sort of give an update on the Starbucks strike?
I could give a little bit of an update. So that strike started back in November. I think 160, maybe closer to 200 stores, I believe, was the number where a number of stores where workers went out on strike. Most of them, my understanding is that as of last week, workers at the vast majority of those stores are back. I think a few as of last week remained out on strike. This is obviously about the contract fight. The first Starbucks stores unionized. This is late 2021 it was, right? So we're over 4 years out now where these workers are still trying to get a first contract. They have continued to file unfair labor practice charges against Starbucks. They've said the company is not bargaining in good faith. Starbucks disputes that. Starbucks claims the union walked away from the table, et cetera, et cetera. Bottom line, workers are still grinding it out for a contract, and they are not. They have TA'd some things, but they are apart on the big issues like pay, healthcare. Things escalated a bit last week when the union called on supporters to delete the Starbucks app. So that was definitely a bit of an escalation. They had picket lines where that they asked workers to observe during the strike, and now they've asked people to delete the app and essentially don't do mobile ordering. So that's where things stand.
Very, very interesting. Kim, I got your note that you have to leave. There's a question for you that I want to throw your way if you can do it in 5 minutes, because I guess somebody knew you were going to be here, almost like we promoted this show. So this is directed to you, Kim. Kim, from your travels in West Virginia and Appalachia, this is a fan. This is a real fan of yours. They're following your movements, apparently. Are you sensing any shift toward greater radicalism and worker activism? Are workers in that part of the country fighting back, or is the economy there just too weak to give them something to fight for? That's a big question.
It is, and I think there's a little bit of a misconception around places like Appalachia and really just the South, is that things are so bad for workers that folks just don't even try. Of course, that's not the case. It's never been the case, especially in Appalachia. My God, that's like one of the only regions in the country where most schools might mention a little whiff of labor history about, right? And actually, a couple months ago, I was in Matewan in West Virginia at Camp Solidarity, which is a biannual labor organizing and history little conference that they do centered around the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum. And folks came from all over the country to talk about organizing tactics and share history. Of course, there's a focus on Appalachia and on West Virginia because there is so much rich history there. Rich history and active organizing. Like one of the sweeter things was we were UMWA 1440, the mine workers union, their local is a big partner of this organizing conference, and they announced at the conference that the museum staffers had just joined the union and unionized with them. So that was just a nice little moment. Like, organizing is happening. A bunch of folks came out from Kentucky and Tennessee who were doing a lot of tenant organizing and community organizing. Like, folks, especially in places like Appalachia that have been stripped of so many resources and left behind by pretty much everybody for a very long time, and are dealing with still the economic and social and environmental after effects of being kind of stripped for parts over the years. Folks are still fighting. It's harder, of course. There's less union friendly resources, less support, but they're not fighting. You know, there are Waffle House workers that have been organizing with the Union of Southern Service Workers. There are still union coal miners in those hills. There are tons of nurses and medical professionals who are organizing around there, because that's one of the industries that's kind of becoming more significant as coal continues to die off. Like, it's, people care, people are fighting. It is a little tougher. There are bigger roadblocks, but it didn't stop them in the 1800s, so it's not going to stop them now. No matter what Fox News or Trump likes to say about, like, oh, coal miners, this, that, and the other, Appalachia is much blacker and browner and more queer and more trans and more radical than any legacy media pundit will tell you. But I know that for sure because I've been there and those are my friends. So don't write them off. Don't feel bad for them. Just when you hear about this organizing, or if you think about it, like, folks are there. They just need our solidarity.
Yeah. All right, that's a great one. Kim may have to jump off, everybody. So thank you, Kim, for being here. Appreciate your answer to that question and your participation today. Let me ask another question. Michael, this one might be for you. Although the opening sentiment, I think, speaks for all of us. This is the question. I hate waiting around for bad news, but I feel like that's all I do nowadays. Yeah, that resonates with me. But here's the question. What is the next big blow the Supreme Court is going to deal to workers' rights in this country? Boy,
Well,
can I just say, this is somebody who has been driven into the depths of pessimism. Wowee. Just waiting around for the Supreme Court to deal a blow to workers' rights. So what do you think is coming next?
Clearly the thing that is literally in front of the Supreme Court this term is the unitary executive power of the president to be able to do whatever the president wants in terms of policy, and that would end up basically, I know there was a decision just recently in Court of Appeals about his anti-DEI policy being constitutional, but what's in front of the Supreme Court, not directly in terms of the Gwen Wilcox case in terms of her firing, but related to that, are decisions regarding FTC commissioner and the Slaughter case and how that will play out. I think everybody, speaking to the person who issued the question, I think everybody is already resigned to the fact that they're going to buy into the executive power because of what they said in the Gwen Wilcox case under their shadow docket about likelihood of success under the theory that they're going to somehow reject or at least limit the law that has allowed independent agencies to have some of their leads have protections from being summarily terminated by the president. So I think that's coming. That'll be the next Supreme Court decision, I think, that will, in essence, limit workers' rights because the endpoint could be that we have no real independent agencies to protect worker protections from the federal government. And it will also open the door for the executive to unleash even more harsher things on workers' rights and use the agencies that are federal agencies as a tool as a weapon to go after certain protections. So I think that's really the next thing. So I'm sorry to whoever sent this question. Steel yourself. Get ready for a decision in the Slaughter case that will make you unhappy.
Well, let me just say, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean everybody's not out to get you. Just because you're pessimistic doesn't mean there isn't bad news coming. Apparently there is. I agree with your assessment on the Slaughter case. I think it's pretty clear that the court is going to say the president can fire the appointees at independent agencies and that the protections that Congress has put in place are unconstitutional. They will, my guess, I'm guessing now, my guess is that they will limit that to the board members, that they will not extend it, because that's the only thing. Well, it won't be, as you said, the decision is not about board members, it's about a member of the Federal Trade Commission.
Yeah.
They will only talk about the appointed members. They will not talk about administrative law judges. The administrative law judges question is a more complicated and difficult question.
It is.
It to some extent, it doesn't matter a lot, but it is a harder legal question for them to get to and is not literally presented by the Slaughter case. Now, they often jump out and manufacture reasons to take on issues that they shouldn't take on. They did that in a number of cases to the benefit of President Trump. But I'm with you. I think that is the next big blow to come. One interesting question is what will end up happening with the tariffs case. I think that will be one that the president loses. That has big implications for workers as consumers and workers in industries that are in trade-sensitive areas, trade-sensitive industries and sectors. But I think that sort of doesn't help build worker power. It may help build jobs in some places, but it's not going to help build worker power.
I think, let me add an interesting point you said. If they wanted to take it on, they could try and address, lower level workers that have so-called adjudicatory authority, like administrative law judges. They punted on this a couple of years ago in the Jarkissi decision, and they just made it about the right to trial. But that was up in front of them about SEC administrative law judges. And I think that is really the issue, because it's very complicated how the NLRA works without administrative law judges who have their, some kind of job security. And so what will happen from that, if they take that on in the Slaughter case, I don't think they will, but if they did, that could be really an interesting detriment for workers going from that.
Yeah, I think we'll have to sort of read between the lines of the decision in order to know how that one is going to come out.
I'm sure the Fifth Circuit will take it on.
Oh, well, the Fifth Circuit, there's no forest that they won't chop down and then burn to the ground. Absolutely. All right, that is the last of our audience questions. Audience, thank you for sticking with us. Dave and Michael, thank you for sticking with us. And Kim in absentia, thank her for sticking with us as long as she could. Another terrific Power Half Hour. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on Power at Work again very soon.
Are you looking for more labor radio shows and podcasts? Well, look no further. Go to the Labor Radio Podcast Network. The network connects more than 200 radio shows and podcasts. To find more great labor content, go to www.laborradionetwork.org. Power at Work is there. You should be too.